So this is the long-awaited sequel to 2015's Inside Out, which of course followed the anthropomorphic emotions of joy, anger, disgust, and sadness, and chronicled the kind of growing up of a young girl named Riley. As in that first movie, it's about her kind of moving cities and adjusting to all that, her learning to deal with all these different emotions. In this sequel, we see Riley grown up a little bit and entering adolescence. She's a young teenage girl. At one point in the console, there's an alarm that says puberty that goes off at one point, and these guys come in and change the console out, install a new one, and then a bunch of new emotions show up, including anxiety, voiced by Maya Hawke, not Disgust, envy, ennui, I can't remember them all. Embarrassment, thank you. And so what this has is it signifies Riley's kind of complexity emotionally as she enters young adulthood. In the real world, she is going into high school, and she's doing this hockey camp for a week with her friends, but she's really worried about making a good impression with the coach, with these older girls. She's a little embarrassed about like her young friends and their kind of immaturity and the things like the music they still like. And so she's trying to like fit in and be one of the cool kids and all those things that young people deal with as they grow up. And this is personified largely by Maya Hawke's anxiety, who kind of becomes the antagonist and eventually kind of takes over all the emotions, where everything is anxiety all the time. The original emotions, joy, voiced by Amy Poehler, have to go on a quest to help Riley find her sense of self again. And she's got to balance like these things with her friends, these new girls, the hockey team, all that stuff. A lot going on. Zach, what'd you think?
So I was definitely skeptical going into Inside Out 2, and I'm pleased to report that it is better than I thought it was going to be, which is good. And I really liked Inside Out 1. I think that's part of the reason I was so skewed walking into this one. Outside of what I said in the news segment about reading about Disney just greenlighting sequels as fast as they can, sure, it's easy to be skeptical about the state of the industry, but when you actually go in to look at the art, to watch the movie, it's important to try to leave that stuff out. And I'm really satisfied to say that Inside Out 2 does manage to pull you in, I think, in the same way the first one does. This device of Riley having a larger story and a larger adventure, and then inside of her, a smaller, totally different set of characters experiencing a similar path, a similar kind of adventure, trying to keep her on track, is good stuff. Like, I think it's creative, I think it's colorful, and I think it has all the elements you like from a Pixar feature. I think the problems are more complex. I think Riley is a more complex character, which demands more complex emotions. I think that all makes sense. And I think also, if you're looking at it cynically, if you're looking at it like an adult watching a Pixar movie at 32 years old and looking for things to blame, admittedly, the plot structure is kind of similar to the first one. And I think that's okay. Yeah, like you go with what the kids like, you stick with it. I think it's good. I think Inside Out 2 is good. I don't think it's as good as the first one, which I think applies to most Pixar sequels. Now we should dig into why, because I don't just want to leave people with like, oh, Zach thought it was lame. That's not what I'm saying. I liked it more than I thought it would. Where do you want to kind of dig in here?
Well, I wanted to start off with saying that I kind of feel a little similarly, that I thought it was fine. I had a hard time getting into it, and I think that's more of a me thing and less of the movie thing. It's been really well received. Lots of people love it. I saw it with a group of people who they were really into it, bawling, sobbing at some of the more emotional moments. And I just couldn't get into it. And so I think a lot of your enjoyment will be how much you relate to the situation and the characters, which, you know, this is a movie aimed at it's a young coming of age story of a teenage girl, which I am not. And I just had a hard time kind of relating to it. I do feel it does follow the same kind of beats of the first movie, where it's like, oh, we have to learn to value all our emotions and balance all those out, and not just because in the first movie, like, joy tries to just be the only emotion. Like, no, Riley can't feel sadness or anger, only joy, and she has to learn, no, all the emotions are important. I feel like we kind of have that message again. So I couldn't really get into it, but I think that, like I said, that's more of a me thing. Most everyone I know is really enjoying it. But yeah, it mostly works, and it's got some issues like anything else. But I will start with this. We do have really good performances, and I was really surprised by Maya Hawke, who I am a certified hater of Maya Hawke. because she's a nepo kid, and I don't like that. But she's actually really good as anxiety, and I didn't realize she actually has to carry a huge amount of the movie because she becomes the antagonist, and she has a lot of the scenes. I thought it would be a little bit more balanced, like the first movie, because apparently Amy Poehler got a huge payday for this, which is why Will. Oh, I can't. A couple of people didn't come back because
Bill Hader and Mindy Kaling.
Yes, thank you.
Disgust. Yeah.
And so Maya Hawke actually does a really great job. Amy Poehler is good again. I couldn't really tell the replacement voices because they don't get as much screen time. The new emotion, the other ones, embarrassment, envy, ennui, they don't really get a lot of screen time, but they're fine. So all the new emotions are fine. There's almost too many of them.
Yeah, I think I everybody does a pretty good job of being in here. I like originally looking at the who was going to be included as far as emotions are concerned. You've got your original 5. What do you got? Joy, anger, envy. Joy, anger, fear, disgust, and sadness. Our new ones are anxiety, envy, ennui, and embarrassment. And you think, okay, you got anxiety followed by 3 E's. Boom, boom, boom. They're all real similar. And like tragically, that kind of falls into the plot of the film. Anxiety is easily like the biggest, most important of those new ones. And I think that's good because like as Riley has gotten older and is moving into kind of the next stage of her life, like she's presented with a new set of emotions and new problems to conquer and like new ways to try to tackle that. And ennui isn't just lazy, ennui brings sarcasm, and envy isn't just like jealous. Envy like sees things that they admire in other people. Like each one of these new emotions has like an equal and opposite good side to them. And anxiety is unique because that would be something that would antagonize you against yourself, right? Like your anxiety in facing a problem may lead you to doing something silly or dumb that may lead to embarrassment or sadness. Like that kind of fits and like plays actually really good opposite joy, like Amy Poehler's like character from the previous film, right? She's back. And like, I think anxiety being couched against her, against happiness is really clever. In the first film, joy is kind of pushed up against sadness, and the two of them fall away from like the controls of Riley and the other emotions, have to try to stay there and manage things and realize ultimately that you need all of the emotions to function to make things work. This movie kind of falls into the same place. Joy and sadness exit the controls along with a bunch of other emotions, and then some of the other emotions try to hang out and kind of wrangle things without them. And part of the lesson is that like you need more emotions to function, but this one like uniquely grows Riley. She has a sense of self. She has these like systems of belief that are presented through like these large kind of string things that you tug on and you can kind of hear. And I like that like, yeah, it pushes the audience to ask questions about themselves, right? What is your system of self-belief? What does that mean to you? How do you handle anxiety? Like all of those, I think, are good kind of Pixar lessons that fit in a setting that is uniquely a sequel as well as a coming-of-age story, a la like Turning Red or even like Toy Story 2 in the way they kind of age up Andy and his toys still kind of look out for him.
Right, exactly. Like you said, it kind of follows a little bit of the same formula from the first one. The all our emotions are important, not just the positive ones. One of the things that I kind of noticed is it does have a lot of humor in it, but it wasn't quite as fun. Like I was kind of chuckling. I was like, it was almost a laugh, but not quite. It's not quite as funny as the first one. I also kind of remember being blown away by like the size and scale because like the depictions of like the mind or these big towers of glowing globes. And I remember at one point they're all crashing and falling over. And we kind of have other adventures that they're, on the stream of consciousness across the sarcasm. And it's clever, it's cute, but it's not really super funny. I mean, some people were laughing a lot. I didn't really find it that funny, but it's fine. That's my description for this whole movie. Like, it's not bad. It's just fine.
No, so I think Riley actually gets a better adventure in this movie. In the first film, she has just moved into a new town with her parents and doesn't really know anybody and still finding a way, misses her friends. And she starts to run away from home. Ultimately, they kind of catch her at the end, and then we have resolution. This film is actually couched in a sports movie, right? Riley's headed to hockey camp, and she's going to go try to show off in front of the high school coach and maybe make the high school team as a freshman, which would just be the coolest thing ever. And that's all great. You got some stuff from the camp. There's a couple girls she admires. There's a coach's red notebook that has all the notes in it about who's getting in the team and who isn't. And boy, it'd be cool if we could just get a look at that for a minute. Like, that all is better. The interior adventure of Joy and Sadness and Friends is not as good. They don't go to as many like cool mind islands with multiple settings. In fact, the things they do kind of jump into, if anything, like I thought were, I don't want to use the word cheap, but I'm going to say budget
underwhelming,
thoughtful, which is weird because this is a $200 million feature, similar to like cutting Bill Hader and Mindy Kaling because they couldn't afford them, I guess, or they just didn't want to work with two actors who would love to be in films that their children would enjoy. Like some of the extra characters included in here are like 2D animated, but like really poorly because it's supposed to imitate like a children's show, but like no children's show that currently exists because none of them are animated that way. Or like there's a video game character named like Lance something, and he's really poorly animated with like clipping
like
hair and stuff. And
yeah.
I just kept thinking, I was like, is this supposed to be funny? That it's bad because it's like, oh yeah, it's like a cheap character, or did you guys literally put this in here because you thought it'll be cheaper to make it? And then I have to remind myself they spent $200 million on this movie. Like, I guess they weren't concerned about budget that much. Like, clearly that wasn't that big of a deal. So I think it's just, I don't know. I think it's just that's just the sauce you get in Inside Out too.
Yeah, I agree that yeah, some of it feels kind of cheap, but it's not as funny as it really should be. Like, you can see the joke being set up and it just doesn't hit. What I was going to say is I agree that Riley's adventure outside of her mind is much more compelling than the inside stuff. Like I said, it's her coming of age, trying to be cool around these high school girls, and like there's some great examples of where like she's from Michigan or she's from Minnesota, and someone's like, "Oh, you're from Michigan, right?" And she doesn't correct them because she's too scared. She's like, "Well, I don't want to be correcting these people. I want those." So she just doesn't, and then they just call her Michigan. Hey, Michigan, like, and it's like not where she's from, and so that becomes a bigger thing, and just the way she's doing all this, like she has some success, like she's pretty good at hockey, but then she's like still too worried about impressing everyone, impressing the coach, making the team, having friends, and she ends up kind of alienating her friends that she's had for several years in favor of these cool high school girls. And like all that, the teen drama of that to me was much more interesting than stuff inside her mind. I was kind of like, let's get past this so we can get to the real drama.
Yeah, and just like the humor doesn't hit quite as well as the first one, like I don't think the emotion does either. There's a couple points in Inside Out, the first film, that are tearjerkers. In this one, there's like one. I think there's points where people get more upset, but like ultimately, like it doesn't quite pop it doesn't pop quite as good as the first one did, and I don't think that's any kind of fault of this feature. I think it's hard to catch lightning in a bottle twice, and like Inside Out was genuinely a step forward for the studio. Like when it came out, it was just following like The Good Dinosaur. This was like a time when Pixar was not really hitting in the same way. And suddenly Inside Out feels like a genuine return to form. Very similar to like Toy Story, right? Like these smaller characters, they're trying to help a young person come into themselves. Like they kind of had that same DNA. You got the imaginary character, Bing Bong, right? From the first film. Like that's all really great. This one, like, because it's trying to tread the same ground, it doesn't get that same like flash of originality to it. Will children care? Absolutely not. Look at the box office numbers. They don't care at all. But if you're an adult walking into it and thinking like, God, that film hit so good back then, lower your expectations. I think you'll be pleased, but don't just expect a hard tearjerker out of the line because I don't think it'll land for everyone.
I had no less than 2 crying babies in my screening, which were never removed from the theater.
I had a number of fathers in our theater that were laughing through like the climactic emotional sequence, which we're not going to spoil on the show. But it didn't fit at all, and I really didn't get it. I was like, is somebody seeing a joke I don't understand? Or like, it was really strange. I think this movie, like in its best moments, I think it encourages you to question yourself and look inside a little bit and ask how your emotions work and what your beliefs are. Like, In its worst moments, I think it's easy to be cynical. But like overall, like I said, I think Inside Out 2 hits better than I thought it would. And I'm really pleased to say that. I am. I'm glad Pixar's doing good. Thank God. I hope they hire a million more animators, make a million more movies like this. But I also really like the originals. And as good as Inside Out 2 is, I don't think it hits as good as Inside Out 1. I don't know if anybody expected it to.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to outdo a sequel, especially. I mean, that was one of the best movies of that year, if not the best movie of that year, according to some people. Really incredible, different approach to both the animation, the adventure, all that, and so it's hard to top that the second go around.
It sure is. Not many other thoughts on it. I think we should leave the people to it. Andy, would you recommend Inside Out 2?
Yeah, overall, yes. If you're the target audience for this, it's a family-friendly movie. If you're a fan of Disney, Pixar, if you like the first one, probably going to enjoy this too. I think, again, how much you relate to it, how much you bring to it will probably have a lot to do with how much you enjoy it. I thought it was a little bit too similar to the first one and it didn't hit as emotionally as the first one did. But it's got great voice acting, great visuals, and it's not too long. It's a fun time, and like I said, hugely packed theaters, so it's hitting with most audiences.
I think you can wait for Disney Plus for this one. Like low key, I would love. I know. I mean, I would love to say like rush out to a theater now, but like, dude, every time Fear talked, it was Tony Hale and not Bill Hader, and I just kept comparing it to the original in my head, and like, despite the box office numbers, the fact is a lot of people are going to be waiting for this to come to Disney Plus, and I think that's totally okay. I don't think it's worth paying for the D box. I don't think it's worth paying to go see it in IMAX. Like I saw it on a standard screen and it was good. It was totally fine. And that's what Inside Out 2 is. It's totally fine. It's good even, but I don't think it's great. And I think the first film might have been great. And I think this is close, but it's no cigar. And I hope whatever they do with Inside Out 3, I'm sure another one's coming. I already read something about a Disney Plus series about dreams in the Inside Out universe. Whatever comes next, because they made way too much money to not make something new. I hope they can continue this without like continuing to lose the parts of what made that first one great. Because this is close, but I don't think it's quite there. And with that, we should probably move into our next segment. We are talking about, well, typically we talk about what's killing cinema on this segment. Andy, what do we call this?
It's time for the death of cinema.